everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5-Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Good morning, Rush Nation. Game 1 of 272 of the regular season is in the books, and the Kansas City Chiefs have survived a late onslaught from the Ravens to win this one 27-20, and it was literally a millimeter that decided the outcome of this game. Isaiah Likely catching a ball with 0-0-0 on the clock, and it was initially ruled a touchdown, but as the replay showed very definitively, he had about a millimeter of his toe on the line. It was ruled incomplete and the game was over. Don't feel the scoreline or the box score really tells the story of the game. I actually thought the Ravens were by far the better team, but also the more disorganized. They had a whole heap of illegal formations and penalties, and they really kind of beat themselves in this game, stalling drives with needless penalties. I think they have 5 or 6 formation penalties in the first half. There was probably about 3 that weren't called as well. There was a whole heap on offense and on defense as well. So there was a lot of issues with the Ravens. They didn't look succinct. They didn't look organized. And I think a lot of people are going to extrapolate some of what happened in this game almost a little bit too far when it comes to some of the fantasy analysis. So I'm going to break down some of the fantasy analysis in this show for this game, because these are 2 teams we want to watch all season. These are 2 teams that have big players drafted early in drafts. And so I think first of all I would say is don't overreact to anything, because that's key. But also, what can we take from this game and try and understand some of the patterns and usage? And the big thing I'd say with the Ravens was they were a bit of a disorganized state on both sides of the ball. Don't forget they've got a new defensive coordinator, new defensive coaching, and they just looked really rusty. Now, this is where preseason is valuable. They would have ironed this out in preseason. They would have, if they played the offensive and defensive lines in preseason for a few series at a time, they would have probably ironed out a lot of these issues, and it would have really helped. And would have helped Lamar Jackson in particular. This offensive line didn't look ready for the season, and Lamar Jackson was punished in the first half for that, and he struggled to get his game going. In the second half, he was absolutely unbelievable as the offensive line finally got some rhythm and timing together. But this is what preseason's for, and this is what annoys me when I see teams just not play anyone in the preseason, like they're not playing any of their starters. And there's some players you can excuse, right? Especially if they're coming back from injury, you don't want to risk them. 10-year veterans like Mike Evans and Tyreek Hill. Okay, fine. You don't want to play those players. They know what they're doing. They know the route concepts. They know the playbook. They have a relationship with the quarterback. I can kind of get on board with that. Even the quarterbacks, I can kind of get. I roll them out for a series or 2, let them get used to, especially if there's changes on the offensive line, then get used to the changes on the offensive line. But play the offensive line for a number of snaps or a number of drives in the preseason. Let them just sort of work out their kinks, their positioning, their lining. Because there was a lot of mistakes made by the Ravens, and this contributed to their defeat in a big, big way. Looking at the Chiefs, I don't think they're outstanding. I don't think they look good at all. Patrick Mahomes did Patrick Mahomes things, but it was really a lot of mistakes from the Ravens that allowed him to profit. We look at the second Xavier Worthy touchdown, and that's Marlon Humphrey's come up as a spy. There's no deep safety behind him. And then, Mahomes has sort of looked around and gone, oh, I've got Xavier Worthy. He's wide open. He'll just run that straight in. And those are the kind of things that you're going to see some overreaction to Xavier Worthy's performance. I'm going to kind of pour some water on that's not going to happen every week. He benefited from a major mistake. And this is why watching the games is really important. So, we'll get to Xavier Worthy and I'll talk about that in just a minute. But I think the key things to kind of take away from this game is both teams were rusty. I think the Chiefs were professional, but I think they lacked cohesiveness, and I think they lacked they lacked that. They hadn't clicked on offense. The one thing that did click was that relationship between Mahomes and Rice. That really sort of clicked on all cylinders, and that looked phenomenal last night. But I think the Chiefs will get better. I think the Ravens will get a lot better. And I think the Ravens look really good. I think the Ravens looked really, really good last night. When they were on it, especially in the second half, I think they looked phenomenal. They were definitely, for me, the better team in this game. but they beat themselves. I don't think the Chiefs beat them. I think the Chiefs were very professional. They did what they had to do. They managed the game well. They managed to lead well, but both teams struggled to establish the run, with the exception of Lamar Jackson. Both teams struggled with big plays until the second half. And then when they started to get their rhythm and go into it, the Ravens just looked the more likely to do damage, pun intended. But we'll get into it. But I think, the key thing I would take away from this game is it's the first game of the season. There was a lot of mistakes, especially on the Ravens side. But there are some things that we can absolutely take away from this. So let's go into the box score first of all. And we'll look purely at the Ravens side first, and then we'll get into the Chiefs. So first of all, you're not going to see Lamar Jackson throw the ball 41 times a game, all that often. So, 41 times, 273 yards, an average of 6.7. There's not much to really read from that other than they were behind for a lot of this game. They were chasing the game. He threw the ball quite considerably. They struggled to establish the run, but they also abandoned the run in the second half. Derrick Henry was scaring the used in the second half, and that was because they were trailing this game quite significantly, and they needed to make plays, and they got something going wide in the flats. And so as a result of that, Derrick Henry was largely ignored for the second half. And I don't think you're going to see the Ravens behind in too many games this season. I don't think you're going to see them chasing games like they were in this game with double-digit deficits all that often. So, I people are going to talk about Derrick Henry and his lack of usage. It purely was game script, and I don't think that game script is going to transpire all that often. So I wouldn't worry about it too much, nor should you read into Lamar Jackson throwing the ball 41 times as something that we're going to see on a consistent basis. I think you'll see him in the low to mid 30s, maybe even the high 20s in games, depending on the outcomes of games. But 41 times is purely on the game script of this game. He did run for 122 yards, and he looked phenomenal running the ball. He was the best player on the field last night and showed why he was the MVP by a country mile, especially on offense. There were some great defensive performances, especially by McDuffie of the Chiefs. He looked phenomenal. Chris Jones looked phenomenal. There was definitely some strong defensive performances, don't get me wrong. But Roquan Smith, good interception there as well, reading a play. He got beat a few times in the flat, though. But I will say this, that Lamar Jackson on offense looked phenomenal. Like he looked like he did in the regular season last season. He just picked up right where he left off. He made plays, and he really brought this team to life. He put them on their backs, and he really delivered a MVP caliber performance. And he was really unfortunate to walk away with a W here. And I think part of that was the mistakes of the offensive line, stalling drives in the first half, and then really unlucky with the positioning of Isaiah Likely, because if that's a touchdown, that goes to overtime. If the Ravens get the ball, I think it's game over. I really do. I think they really had something going in that fourth quarter. All the momentum was with them. It was carrying them. There was every chance they win that game in overtime, and they would have been worthy winners had they pulled it off. So we're talking about a millimeter here that cost them overtime. So it's a really interesting one, but I think Lamar Jackson was brilliant. I've talked about Derrick Henry, 13 carries for 46 yards. At an average of 3.5 yards per carry and a touchdown. He did also, there were a couple of times in the flat where he was targeted, 2 targets for 0 catches. That relationship with Lamar just not there yet. They were just off a step both times, ball sailing once behind and once in front. That happens, right? First game of the season. So I'm not worried about Derrick Henry's usage. The game dictated his usage quite significantly. We saw Zay Flowers with a couple of carries. We saw Justice Hill with just the 1 carry. But what we did see from Justice Hill, and this is going to tie into Isaiah Likely, was this usage in the flat. Now, it seems to me with Todd Monken, they want to play a spread offense. They want to get players out wide in the flat, and they're going to use Isaiah Likely. And maybe they transition to Mark Andrews as well. We don't know what that situation is entirely, sort of behind closed doors. But Justice Hill is going to get a lot of that work. So if you look at the pass charts of Isaiah Likely, and let's pull it up. Let's go through it and show you. So I'll show you first of all. Let's look at that's Patrick Mahomes's. So let's not use that one. Let's use this one. Let's pulled up the wrong one again. It keeps pulling up this one. I don't know why. Okay, this is terrible audio. I do apologize big time. This is the one I want to share. Let's see if that... Yeah, there we go. I think it shared before. It was on my screen. It was showing something different. Right, so this is Lamar Jackson's pass chart. And you can see here where the majority of the throws and completions are. And they're here in this sort of area. And this is a lot of where Isaiah Likely and Justice Hill caught the ball. Got a couple from Mark Andrews as well. But this is where the predominant work was of Lamar Jackson in his passing chart. So we're going to see a significant amount of work in the flat, it seems. Maybe it was this game and it was game script dependent. Maybe it was opponent dependent. Maybe this is just how they feel they're going to get the best. Knowing Todd Monken, you're going to see a bit of this. And with now a sort of natural out-and-out slot receiver, it looks like it's going to be both Hill and then potentially either Likely or Andrews or both of them. And maybe that usage is there for debate. We're going to see this between those three players. So Hill absolutely has a fantasy-worthy role. It's going to be low flex, but with that upside of being that that handcuff to Derrick Henry. So, but what you did see here with Lamar Jackson is he wasn't afraid to take shots. And if we show the Patrick Mahomes pass chart shortly, he was the one that definitely took the risks. And you would expect that being behind this catch to Bateman set up that last drive really deep. There's another one from here from Bateman as well. This touchdown here I'll talk about in just a second to Isaiah Likely. So you're going to see here Hill, Likely, and then Andrews come into play here quite significantly. And one of the stories of last night was this was the story of Isaiah Likely versus Mark Andrews. And you know, I don't want to hit the panic button just yet. I think it'd be really easy to do, right? It'd be really easy to hit the panic button on this, and I can definitely see instances where this is going to happen. But this is the Isaiah Likely chart, and so he went all over. These sort of dark gray routes here are incomplete routes. So these were he was running as decoy, or he sort of abandoned them because the ball was already released. We can see he's getting his catches. And again, the majority of these right here are in this flat area, almost like a traditional, almost like a screen or a slot receiver, or where the play breaks down and the pressures come and Lamar's dumping the ball off. And you know, this is a very similar story to what happened with Justice Hill. Again, this is where they were getting their usage. Now, part of this was that interior front three of the Chiefs definitely brought the pressure a lot, and it forced Lamar to be agile. But also there were times he couldn't escape, and so therefore he would then, if he did escape, he'd run up here, up the middle, or if he couldn't escape, he would be putting the ball here out wide. And this appeared to be a designed tactic to counter that front three of the Chiefs. So this touchdown to Likely, you know, you look at his stat line, it's and it is a remarkable stat line. You know, 12 targets, 9 receptions, 111 yards, and 1 TD. The one thing I will say is this is glossed by the TD. I mean, listen, you've got 9 catches. It's significant. I'm not blowing it under the bus. But this TD to Isaiah Likely, Lamar Jackson is, and we've seen it on his passing chart, has run out here. He's on the run. And Isaiah Likely does really well to come back and create space. And then he comes back, creates space, and then he beats his man, gets to the outside, and runs in the touchdown. He actually takes a cut in towards the end and scores his touchdown. Now, it was a broken down play. It wasn't a designed run. It wasn't a designed passing play. It was an on-the-fly improvisation. And credit to both players. You know, they're both very talented players, and they did very, very well. A lot of this was at the feet of Lamar Jackson, who just bought enough time, and allowed someone to get open. And of Isaiah Likely, beating two men and making it work. But my point is, this went for nearly 50 yards. So this was a 49-yard touchdown, which is almost half of Likely's yards and his touchdown. If this play doesn't happen, and again, I know if, ands, or maybes, but Isaiah Likely's stat line is significantly different. He's 8 of 60, effectively. 8 for 62, no touchdown. And this doesn't become as much of a story. It's, okay, he got more catches and more targets. And then obviously as well, on the flip side of this, he was very unlucky not to score the game-winning touchdown. So I get that. And there is definitely going to be the story of he was one of the guys that was heavily targeted. He was the most heavily targeted person in this game, but he obviously was the one that Lamar Jackson fancied to get in to make plays. And he was making really, really, really good plays in this game. Don't get me wrong. And he was definitely the one to trust. Mark Andrews didn't really get the same love. 2 targets. He caught them both for 14 yards. I'm sure we'll probably hear a bit more. I would say that Isaiah Likely, definitely, if he's available in your league, becomes a waiver wire ad. But don't expect this kind of stat line. In fact, expect some regression back, because this play here makes up a huge chunk of his yards. And it was one that was just very much, I don't want to say luck, but it's not one that's planned. So when you take out that really big volume play, it's a fairly ordinary stat line that's based heavy on volume. And if that volume goes towards Mark Andrews, as we would kind of expect it to, then all of a sudden, Isaiah Likely doesn't become as fantasy relevant. So that's a really big takeaway of this game, and one to think about. I talked about Rashod Bateman a lot in the preseason. He had 5 targets in this game. A lot of them were the deep ball threats. He was very close on a couple as well. One he was sort of stripped out of. I think you've seen it here that he was targeted, not, half as much as, say, Flowers. But the one thing I would say is he is getting a role in this offense. And Rashod Bateman, I think, usage will only go up. And I would look at that and say, Rashod Bateman is a guy you should be looking at adding in leagues if you haven't already. Dave Flowers had a pretty, I don't want to say disappointing game, but he had 10 targets. The volume's there, 10 targets, 6 for 37. It was a tough assignment for him week 1. I talked about it in the matchup show. I just didn't like his matchup and usage this week, and ranked him down significantly lower, and I feel pretty good that I did. In fact, if anything, I didn't rank him low enough. So again, to take away and short case the Baltimore Ravens is Derrick Henry. Don't be too worried. The game script went against him. Didn't get a lot of usage in the second half. Rashod Bateman is going to be a thing, and we need to watch this Isaiah Likely and Mark Andrews situation carefully. What I would say is, don't be too scared about Mark Andrews just yet. Don't hit the panic button, and don't get too excited about Isaiah Likely just yet, because a lot of this was based on this one touchdown. You take this touchdown away, then we're just talking about the heavy usage, not the heavy usage. And yes, I get it. There was also an incomplete pass at the end of the game, and it was thrown to him, and that was a mistake. The other thing is, Zay Flowers and should have caught a touchdown about 2 plays before this, and it was wide open, and Lamar Jackson missed him. So, week 1, don't jump too much, but there's some insight to definitely take away and look at in more detail. If we talk about Patrick Mahomes, this is a much simpler game to break down from the Mahomes perspective, in the sense of, we can look here, it looks relatively safe. Everything's over the middle. The one thing we'd say is not a lot of Travis Kelce usage. A lot of this usage over the middle went to Rashee Rice. And the one thing we would say here is that Travis Kelce was second on the team in targets with 4. The Ravens did really well in bringing up safeties and bringing up the cornerbacks and spies, and they really sort of restricted that big play ability of Patrick Mahomes. But he took what was given to him, which was dumping the ball off. And you had a lot of instances where the line pushed up in the first half. And so what happened was they were bringing the linebackers quite a bit forward. And then in the second half, what was happening was Patrick Mahomes was delaying 1 or 2 extra seconds and allowing Rashee Rice to go round the linebackers. And then all of a sudden he's sort of in. This is like one of these examples here and there's another one here. These two here appear to be Rashee Rice catches where the linebackers have moved up, and then all of a sudden you've got this instance where he's behind and then he can make a gain. The interception here, it was why this tactic working. This was in the first half. Was they brought these linebackers up in Roquan Smith? He came up, he catches. He literally cuts off a pass to Rashee Rice. He read it, he jumped it, and he caught it. So what they did was made the adjustment in the second half. Patrick Mahomes held onto the ball a bit longer. He cut away those instant snaps, which they were getting success from, and then delayed a little bit more, which was really useful. This touchdown pass to Xavier Worthy. So let's get on to Xavier Worthy. Xavier Worthy had three touches in this game. He had a 21-yard touchdown, which was effectively an end around, which was incredible. Like incredible speed, don't get me wrong. And then he had 3 targets for 2 catches for 47 yards and a TD. And this was the TD that he catches. This TD should never have happened. And this is what I call a week 1 TD. So you've got here Marlon Humphrey. He comes up. He thinks there's a deep safety behind him. There isn't. And what happens is Patrick Mahomes goes, thank you very much. He throws the ball. Xavier Worthy is in 5 yards of space in all directions. There's no one behind him, and he just sits there and runs. There's literally no one to cover him, and he walks it in. And it is a really simple, basic touchdown of all levels. And John Harbaugh will be absolutely livid that they've given this touchdown up, because this TD should never happen. It should never happen at this level, and that's week 1 rustiness. And again, this is Ravens beating Ravens. This was really basic stuff. A lack of communication across the board in week 1 really cost them, because this turned out to be the winning touchdown. This was the difference between the two teams at the end of the game, and this touchdown should never have happened, especially with the players they have on the field. Marlon Humphrey thought someone was behind, someone wasn't behind, and then this happens. This is a really basic error. So a lot of the plaudits are going to go to Xavier Worthy. I'm going to pour water on this and say this TD should never have happened. And the volume's not there to sustain it. So, like, if you're going to start Xavier Worthy next week in a redraft league, then just be prepared for the results. He is a high upside player, and they said this in the matchup show, but I had him ranked outside the top 50 for a reason. And I didn't believe he was going to get a lot of volume. I thought it would go to Rice. I had Rice up there. It's sort of wide receiver 6, wide receiver 7, because I felt he was going to get a lot of the ball. Now, I also felt that Travis Kelce was going to get a lot of the ball. That didn't happen. Really simply, that the Ravens just took him out of the game and made it very difficult. He was always pretty well spied on and covered through this game, and the Ravens did make a lot of moves to sort of condense and collapse the routes that Travis Kelce would be successful in. But then you saw other guys step up. Rice was an example. Noah Gray got some over the middle. He caught all 3 of his targets for 37. Justin Watson caught 1 over the middle for 25. And these are, and I think Smarty P. Ryan got 1 for 10 yards as well. And it was all this stuff over the middle that you would normally see Travis Kelce get, but Travis Kelce was effectively running a lot of decoys to get these guys open and allow for the chains to move. And they were really good. And this is an example of Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid swallowing their pride, doing the stuff that doesn't get you on SportsCenter for those top 10 plays. And there's not a huge amount of highlight plays in this performance, but they took what was given to them and they executed it brilliantly. There's not many incompletions here for Patrick Mahomes. In fact, he completed 20 of his 28 passes for 291. And then you did just have the 1 interception, which was just, it was more a great defensive play than it was a bad throw. We did also have an example here of Patrick Mahomes catching his own pass where it was blocked late in the 4th and he stands up and catches it. So if you win by 1.1 points or less and you have Patrick Mahomes, then you can thank the Ravens defense for giving that to you. But I think going forward, I wouldn't be too worried about Travis Kelce. This was one of those instances of good defense, sort of boxing him up a bit. That's going to happen. But it's going to be the Rashee Rice show until we find out what happens with his suspension. And just hold fire on Travis Kelce, on Xavier Worthy, because, again, this touchdown here should never happen. It shouldn't happen, and this really adds a gloss to the stat line quite significantly. Now, we look at, and again, the 3 targets tells you more than the touchdown for me. Isaiah Pacheco didn't really establish the run well. He did score the touchdown. It was more the fact he was bundled over. Patrick Mahomes was one of those that helped sort of push him in. I actually don't believe this should have been a touchdown. I believe he was stalled. He was stalled dead. For some reason, they let it continue on. He squirrels out the side and he scores. I'm not convinced there's forward progress there at all points. I believe that he is going backwards at one point, and at that point, I think they should have stalled. They should have called it dead. But there you go. He gets in the box. 15 for 45 is not a great stat line. He struggled all night to establish the run. His long run was 5 yards. He really didn't. And it wasn't him. It was just a stacked box. It was difficult. Both these teams really struggled to establish the run. They kind of negated each other in that regard. He did have 3 targets and he caught 2 for 33. This glosses his stat line a bit because all of a sudden you've got 10.8 fantasy points in PPR, and then you got the touchdown, which takes him to 16.8. And all of a sudden it's, oh, well, that's not a bad day's work. He gets a lot of gloss here. That touchdown doesn't stand, and he decided to pass it. I'm not saying be worried about Isaiah Pacheco, but one of the reasons I thought he was overdrafted is I didn't see this huge role. And this was a great game script for him. They were up by 10. And we just didn't see them get established with the run. And to see him not get as many carries as, he should have been nearer to 20 carries. The one thing we will say is that we definitely didn't see Samaje Perine run the ball at all. Which was interesting, and that's some usage, maybe because he's new to the team. He hadn't quite got the book down pat, but that's one to keep an eye on. But Xavier Worthy in the rushing game could be where we see some early value from him. And, he did only have the 1 carry, but he did score a 21-yard touchdown on it. So one to keep an eye on. But that's everything you kind of need to know from this game. And I've gone into more depth than I probably will do about some of the other Thursday night games, because of the fact this was so interesting, because of the fact there is so many headlines, and fantasy managers aren't going to rip their heads open when they look at the box scores this morning. And I just wanted to digest it. I've watched the game. I looked at every play. I looked at every angle. And I just think that sometimes you've got to watch the games and fully understand what goes on. And you need a voice of reason. Hopefully I am that voice of reason this morning for you. I would say if you're a Ravens fan and you're feeling sore this morning, I wouldn't feel too bad. I think you played really well, but a lot of basic mistakes that really preseason, and I think that's on the coaching staff and more than the players, because I think that needed to get sorted out. But that's everything that you need to know about yesterday. I think the Chiefs will get a lot better. I wouldn't worry about the big names who didn't land. I would pour water a little bit on the Xavier Worthy show. I don't think it was a Xavier Worthy show. I mean, anytime you get 2 touchdowns, it is significant, but you have to look at the context of them, especially when you have a touchdown like this one on the screen. That's something that you've just got to keep an eye on and say that probably doesn't happen more often than not. And it wasn't like Worthy made a great play like Isaiah Likely made a great play. It was, he ran a route, he was wide open where he shouldn't have been, and they profited from it. So, but that's going to do it, Rush Nation. That's going to do it for this week. We've given you a lot of information to get ready for this week. We have done matchup show. We have done all our rankings. We have done, we've introduced you to a new way of playing fantasy football via the Fantasy Game Day app, and I hope you had a good time listening to that one last night. Stocks and I went through some additional strategy of how to manage your bench. We've done start sits. We've done waiver wires. We've done absolutely everything that we can think of to prepare you for this weekend. The last piece of advice to say from me is don't get too cute. Don't get too carried away. And don't overthink things. There's lots of situations where people are thinking about doing something radical, and just perhaps play it safe in week 1. See where the land lies. More often than not, they're going to go with the studs and they're going to go with the experience than they will with the rookie. And that's the last piece of advice I'm going to give you. Thank you very much for tuning in this week. I hope that you have enjoyed it. I hope that it's given you a lot of food for thought. And I hope that most of all that you're able to have taken away a lot of useful, I don't really know what to say, but useful advice, and feel free to interact ongoing start sits, the way I do start sits, really simply, I do Patreons first. And if I get time for other people, I will, but there's no guarantee. I've had instances where I've had like 80 to 100 requests, and I just don't have that sort of time. If you do have requests, there may be some time Sunday, very early Sunday morning, for me to just do a quick voice note kind of pod. But it will be a pod, not a video. But we'll see how we get on. But that's going to do it. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for everything this week. We'll be back with waiver wires on Monday to talk about week 2, and we digest all the football. But enjoy the lack of sleep. Football is back. Make the most of it and celebrate it like it's Christmas. And don't forget, as always, have a good weekend and keep rushing.